I'd like to know from both of you about the role of biology in space science.
The role of a biologist is a really important one because if you think about what NASA is trying to do is to really get us back into space for sustained stays. We really need to understand what those changes are on biological systems so that we can make sure that humans are comfortable.
How do you prep these astronauts to get into a space mission and just go missing for the rest of the week or month?
The astronauts are really a long preparation. The selection is the first step, I would say. Among thousands of applicants, you will have only 4 going to space. First of all, we have the parabolic flight, put volunteers in a bed, the head 6 degrees below the feet, but you have to stay the full time in bed.
Back in 2004, I had a class with 4 astronauts. Sunita Williams was one of them. And we spent 1 full month. We had our meals together. We did classes all day. And the purpose of that class was to teach astronauts about the importance of doing science.
Good evening, Mila. Good evening, Brigitte. It's really nice to have you both here. And I know how difficult it is to get NASA and European Space Agency at the same time. And that too, 2 biologists from these agencies. I'd like to know from both of you about the role of biology in space science. Because when we hear about space science, the kind of one has the idea of a jet propulsion laboratory, or you're thinking about a physicist who is working with an astronaut, but we never think about biologists who are in that space. So, Mila, if you can just start with your example of your role as a biologist in NASA. What exactly are you doing?
Yes, sure. You're right that the biologists are fewer in number than the engineers and the other folks that work at NASA. But the role of a biologist is a really important one because if you think about what NASA is trying to do, or one of the other space agencies trying to do, is to really get us back into space for sustained stays as a human species with all the things that we're used to around us, you know, whether they're plants, whether there are medicines, whether there are activities. It is for sustained stays in space. And so we really need to understand what those changes are on biological systems so that we can make sure that humans are comfortable. And while Brigitte is going to talk and address more the human aspect, the part of biology that I'm involved in is the fundamental research aspect with model organisms that help us understand what those changes will be so that we can then translate that information to the human, to the astronaut, and ensure that we can have long duration space exploration.
Right. So, and Brigitte, you are a flight surgeon. So are you a surgeon in a flight, or what does that actually mean for space science?
Yes, thank you. This word, flight surgeon, is a really big word that I'm not surgeon. I am a medical doctor and taking care of the astronauts. This is the name that we use. The French name will be different. Just a family doctor for astronauts, maybe. Yeah. And coming back maybe to the biology, you mentioned that I'm biologist as well, but not a scientist. My specialty in medical is medical biology. So it's important role as well to understand how is normal blood parameters.
Yeah.
And that's a point which was always important in my career with astronaut as well, because we have to deal with the science, but as well with what do you have before going to space.
Right. So you majorly deal with humans and real astronauts and impacting their body when they go to space. But then, Mila, you just mentioned that you work on model organisms and not human beings. So what is the model organism, and how can you extrapolate it from some other species, what you're finding, to a human body?
Sure, yeah. So, for example, there are a variety of different model organisms that people use in science for space.
Right.
Some of the ones I've used have been fruit flies, yeast cells, worked a little bit with rodent studies as well as with tissue culture, human tissue culture cells in a petri plate. And the way that it works, just to give you an example, with, let's say, the fruit fly, a lot of people, when I say, oh, I've done studies in space with fruit flies, they're like, why would you, look at a fruit fly to tell you what's going to happen in a human? So something that surprises a lot of people is to hear that if you looked at all the genes in a human being that are important for function, because if there's a mutation, you get a human disease.
Right.
If you took that cohort of genes and you looked, and now that everything is sequenced, if you look at the Drosophila genome and you compared that set of genes between fruit flies and humans, which are functionally important, you would find that there's a 75% homology between the genes of the two species. So even though they look so different and they're different in complexity, but the basic fundamental function of two organisms that are so different can be very similar. So the reason I used fruit flies is, in space where you can't take up an elephant to do your study, you're limited for mass and volume and size, in a little box like this, I can fly 10,000 and more fruit flies. So when I see a change that's subtle, since all these flies are genetically identical, I can do some good statistics and tell you with confidence that if I see a 10% or 20% change in cardiovascular function or brain function, that's real because I have such a large population. Even though we have a laboratory in space, just like we have laboratories on the ground,
right? But
the ones in space look a little bit different because even if they're doing the same function, like sequencing DNA or sequencing RNA, the way you do it on Earth is so different because you can't just, transfer fluids from one vial to another because we need gravity for that. Here in space, we have to use capillary action and other things too. So when we design hardware to do experiments in space, they have to be specially modified to work in space.
I see. So there's a lot of prep going on to understand how prepped the humans have to be to go into space. So coming to that, Brigitte, how do you prep these astronauts to get into a space mission and just go missing for the rest of the week or month?
Yes, the astronauts are really a long preparation.
Yeah.
Usually the selection is the first step, I would say. So among thousands of applicants, you will have only 4 going to space. So it helps you to understand. So of course, among them, you test a lot of parameters from their body.
Yeah.
But other than that, they are going to the space station to do science. So they need to be knowledgeable in everything. So doing the experiment of the scientists, so they train a lot on the ground, but they need to be able to go to drive with a rocket there. So they train a lot. It's a huge amount of hours.
Yeah.
They train on the medical side because it's not always that we have a medical doctor on board.
Yeah.
So they have some more skills, and we have what we call a crew medical officer.
Yeah.
Among the 6 on board the space station, you will have usually 2 or 3 specifically trained for medical duties. So I would say after the selection, it's more or less 2 years training for them.
Yeah, wow.
And after, when they are assigned to a mission, they will have again a new training to make sure that they have not forgot anything. They will, for the European, for sure, we need to go to Russia to train on the equipment there, to NASA, because right now we are using on board the space station the NASA tools, I would say. So we need to train them with exactly what they will have on board, learn the procedure. And I forgot one more important stuff, which is extravehicular activity. So on that one, they will train a lot and spend hours and hours to be really ready for their flight.
So what is that, extravehicular?
Yeah, extravehicular activity. So you know, sometimes when we build the station at the beginning, it was pieces by pieces, and you have to have an astronaut going outside the station. For example, for the solar. We have some experiment with animals regarding radiation outside the space station. And in that condition, you need to have a spacewalk. On that one, I can tell you, you need really to be fit, first of all, but train a lot. You spend hours and hours because, as Sharmila mentioned, it's really hard to do activities on board because we are born on Earth.
Yeah.
We have the gravity.
Yeah.
As soon as you will be in the space station, everything is flying. So you need to have tools to avoid that. But of course, regarding the flight of the space walk, so you need to have a specific a space suit, and they will spend hours outside. 6 or 7 hours. But the preparation before takes the same time.
Right.
So this is, I cannot summarize it so, but I think this is and they need to know the station to fix everything, the maintenance of the station, sport, because they will do a lot of sport. So yes, 2 years training is not too much for them.
Because, usually when astronauts go or come back, it's always like a single hero story, how it's projected, because the astronaut is praised and he's all over the media, he or she. But I think there is a huge work and huge team working behind that. So if I ask you for a number, for a single astronaut to go to space, so you can take all this training right from the beginning to the end, how many people are involved actually?
I would say about maybe 1,000, because when you think about technician guys, and to come back on the science regarding what Mila said just before, it's really mandatory to have all of this science on animals, even though they are not the same as human beings. You cannot imagine to send somebody. It will be really the first part. So regarding all of that, when I say 1,000, probably I'm far away, because we have all of the students we have working in laboratories on the experiment. All of these communication people, for example, in Europe, or small part from the International Station is what we call the Columbus. This is where we are doing science. And on that one, if I remember well, when I was in Toulouse, when there are communication with the astronaut, when he's doing the science, you have already 20 people behind. So this is only in one small place. So I'm unable to give you any word. If we think we work NASA and ESA and Russian together, I'm probably really far away of the good number.
Oh, wow. I mean, that's amazing, because this is something that people do not think about, the behind the scenes picture. When you talk about cooperation, whether it is NASA or ESA or ISRO, there's a certain amount of sensitivity to it, right? Because every country wants to sort of have their own mission, do not want to share everything. So where does collaboration stand in that? Because NASA and ISRO has been collaborating quite a bit, and ESA has been collaborating with India quite a bit. So how does this play around? How do you balance this sensitivity of information and also the cooperation aspects?
Working in space has been historically a really quite a collaborative effort. Just look at the International Space Station. We couldn't have done that without global cooperation. And so even at times when, for example, Russia and the US were politically not working together very closely, but in space, we were working together closely. And the International Space Station would not be here today if the Russians, the Americans, the Europeans, the Canadians, the Japanese, if we hadn't all worked together, we wouldn't have had that platform. So I think in some ways, which make me really happy to work in the space arena, I think it is a very cooperative space, because it's a very difficult business. So you can't do it alone. The more you work with other people, the better is the product.
So when you talk about biological health, I know that there are a lot of human experiments that you're also performing, and not all of them are performed on astronauts per se, but you have volunteers that are coming in. Is that right?
Yes, you're completely correct. And so we mentioned about the animals and what Mila is doing. This is really mandatory, the first point. As soon as we know it's working, so we can try to do that on human. And we have 2 models, even 3, to simulate weightlessness on the ground. So first of all, we have the parabolic flight. But on that one, you get in 30 parables, you will get each time 20 seconds of weightlessness. But it's not enough, of course, to have more information regarding human being. So we do that on 2 ways. On the bed rest studies, bed rest is we put volunteers in a bed. So the model which working the best is the one with the head 6 degrees below the feet, which simulate perfectly well this fluid shift. So all the fluid going to the upper part of the body.
Yeah.
But then in that case, you have 3 type of time for the experiment. It could be a short one, with in between 8 or 10 days, a longer one with 1 month, and the longer 2 months. So, but you have to stay the full time in bed.
Okay.
And
Wow.
you are not the volunteers. So it's really the selection is a hard process as well, and we try to get the same condition as the astronauts. And the second model is the third one is a dry immersion model. This is maybe the best simulation,
Right?
Because you remember when the astronauts are on board, the position change completely. They are like a baby embryological sitting, a lot like sitting.
Yeah.
Floating, but as soon as you go out of the bath to do experiment, you have to keep this position lying down, and even for the one in the bed rest, you never allowed them to go upside, because if you do that, you just change. So this is but these models are really helping to test medication, to test a new exercise device, to improve the way of the astronaut on board.
Okay, so Mila, coming to fitness, so NASA had a fit experiment, right? Weren't you a part of that? And if yes, can you just say a little bit about how that influenced the perception of health in space?
If you're talking about the experiment that I did called FIT, that was actually using Drosophila fruit flies and looking at the immune system function.
Yeah.
And we did find that there were changes in immune function from Drosophila that had been in space. And then we brought them back down. We exposed them to different microbial infections to look at their capability to fight those infections.
Right.
So that was the stuff I did. However, on the flip side, from more studies for the human in terms of fitness, definitely from the early days of astronauts flying in space to now, because there's so much data on muscle weakness and bone density loss from spaceflight, from prolonged being, the unloading of muscles and bones in space. So with some of the science, that data that has come from that, now that has been instituted, and Brigitte can tell you, the regimen, the exercise regimens that astronauts have to undergo. But those norms have come from the science that has been done over the years to look at muscle and bone and other structural tissue changes.
Right. And do you see that the challenges are much more for women who are going to fly into space? Or is it the same across gender?
I would say for the training, you mean?
Training, and also like you have things like your menstruation, and you have other hormonal challenges with women. So how is that more challenging?
Yeah, I mean, this is exactly why we had this experiment, the bed rest experiment I was mentioning about the woman, because they wanted to see what will be the challenge on the hormonal system.
Right.
And finally, we have no other bed rest studies with only women, because we saw that. Okay, so they are fitting well, they are doing well, not that much problem. You're right. It's more the problem of the menstruation and so on is more a medical problem that we have to handle, that we know how to do that, rather than gender problem. If your selection process is well done, you will have the fitted subject. I haven't mentioned during the training time, we have what we call the survival training. In case of an emergency, it could happen that it's not landing at the point you were waiting for. And then there could be some days before you
get to the point.
And it's happened to some astronauts. I can tell you, really? Not to mine. I was lucky enough.
Mila, you have a very famous student who got into the media recently for a lot of reasons, which is Sunita Williams. So how did you come in contact with her?
Yeah, so as you were mentioning earlier, part of what we do as part of our job is, of course, science, or in Brigitte's case, practicing medicine, but also training the next generation, right?
Right.
In Sunny's case, she's not quite the next generation, but a lot of the astronauts are trained helicopter pilots or fighter pilots, or engineers, etc. And yet they're the ones who actually do our science experiments for us and with us when they're in space. And so back in 2004, I had a class with 4 astronauts, and Sunny Williams was one of them, and then Tracy Dyson and Dan Burbank and Jeff Williams, all of whom went on to be very successful and wonderful astronauts. And the purpose of that class was to teach astronauts about the importance of doing science.
Right.
And so Sunny was one of my students, and we spent 1 full month. Actually, we all lived in the dorms in Woods Hole, Massachusetts. And, we had our meals together. We did classes all day together. We did lab classes, lecture classes. And so that's when I first met Sunny. And that was 21 years ago. And since then, since she's at NASA, I'm at NASA, we meet quite frequently at various places. And so we, got to stay in contact. And she and the other astronauts, they're just really an amazing group of people. And I think both Brigitte and I can say that working with an astronaut just makes it so easy because they're so responsive, they're so intelligent, they work together so well as a group, as a team, that it's a pleasure to teach them and to work with them.
Right. So recently when Sunita Williams was stuck in space, there was a lot of frenzy in the media saying that that she has gone for a shorter mission and she ended up there for months and it is not good for her health. Is that true, or are they already prepped to actually carry on a longer mission in space?
Yeah, great point. So Sunny Williams, for example, is a very experienced astronaut and had done many missions before. So while it's true that the initial Boeing flight that she was on was meant to be a shorter one, and it ended up keeping her there longer. But she is actually very experienced and is completely able to be in space for longer periods of time. And as a matter of fact, astronauts now have been in space, several months up to a year, in some cases over a year. And the reason that we are increasingly increasing the duration that astronauts stay there and work is because as we plan to get to Mars and back, that's going to be a 2 to 3 year round trip mission.
Right.
So we need to collect that data on how we as a human, as human beings and crew members can operate and be functional for these long durations of time. And so even on the International Space Station, we're increasing those durations. And Sunny, does a great job. Of course, having said that, there are definitely biological and physiological changes when you're in space for longer periods of time.
Yeah. For that, we have people like Brigitte to take care of the effects and impacts. And also, so when you work together with astronauts, you said there's a huge team working out there, right? How involved are astronauts in your experiments?
For Samantha Cristoforetti, the Italian astronaut. So I was doing this experiment on the International Space Station with fruit flies, and some of my flies were in a centrifuge, and they were going to be simulating 1G gravity in space. And so, and you know how it is with experiments. You work for months to years with your students and your postdocs to get ready for these experiments, and you get one chance to get it right. So we're on the International Space Station, and they're radioing down to us during the crew ops. And then at one point we get the message that one of the centrifuges is not working. It's not starting.
Right.
And, my, hand goes to my head saying, oh my gosh, my experiment could get messed up because of this. And then without another word, Samantha goes, gets a piece of tape, She wraps it around the centrifuge that's not working, and she pulls it like a lawnmower, and she jump starts that centrifuge, which then starts working, and my experiment went perfectly. So, they are not only, extremely well trained and well prepared, but they're also extremely innovative and creative, and they can think on the spot, and so they're really model partners to be working with.
Do you think that now the focus has shifted a lot from moon to Mars? So why is that? Is there any biological reason for that, or is it something which is super technical, or is it something to do with financials, or what is it?
Yeah, so I think it's a combination of things. So one of the things is that yes, we haven't been back to the moon in 50 plus years.
Yeah.
But we've never been on Mars, right? So that's one thing.
Right.
So it's that natural human curiosity to conquer the next step of science, of exploration. But also, I think on top of that is the fact that we anticipate that there may be water reserves deep under the surface in Mars.
Right.
And so just like on the moon as well. Now, with some of the missions, we found that there are likely water deposits, for example, on the south pole of the moon. So similarly with Mars. And why is water important? Because we as a human species, we need water to survive.
Right.
And yes, we can take some water up, but with all the limitations we have for upmass and so on, we can't take endless resources of water. So if we can recycle water, if we can do what is called in situ resource utilization and find what we need there, whether it's regolith, which is the soil, and we can use that somehow, if we can use water that we find there, then those things really help us. So I think that's the other reason why Mars is a very attractive destination, because we think there's water there. There might have been life there before. And it's also in a way reachable, because it's far, but it's not so far that will take us an entire lifetime to get there.
Right.
In 6 to 9 months, we can get to Mars, and 6 to 9 months, we can get back. So we can do science there. It's the next frontier for us to understand as a species. So I think that's why Mars is so popular.
Yeah, and I think it's something new. You need to attract people. This is something new is always motivating for the people, and
absolutely right. So many of these concepts that you're using in space sciences is derived from a lot of background experimentation on ground. But are there anything which has happened reverse, that you have discovered something in space science in space, and that has been translated onto the Earth in leading to discovery in other contexts as well?
I will say the other way around. In fact, yes. For example, we design some tools to go in space, which are still used to nowadays, like Altair, to measure. So design small tools, usable easily.
Which are used for other contexts also.
So I think Brigitte, what you're probably mentioning is medical devices.
Yes.
Miniaturizing medical devices.
Yes.
That's been, because again, the miniaturization, the lightweight is very important in space. And so some of those things. Other examples that I can think of, for example, is water reclamation, water recycling. That's been really important, for example, on the space station.
Right.
And some of those tools then can be used on Earth in places where water is scarce, where we can reuse, wastewater and make it potable water, for example.
Yeah, and this spacesuit they have designed, that it is used as well for some people having some really hard genetic skin disease. We protect them from the sun. So I mean, this is on the both side, and I think nowadays we really need to think about experiments useful for human on the ground. This is more or less, if you want to get money from, this is really important, because you need to, some people will tell you, okay, space is just few people. We know now it's much more than that involved. But if we can use what we learned there, so this is really, both sides are really happy, and it's nice.
It's a win-win. Yeah.
Right. So I think both of you have had a really fantastic career in space science, that too in biology. So if I may ask, how did you get to be a flight surgeon in a space science laboratory?
Yeah, my dream was always to work with the sky. So either being a pilot, but I had a bad view, so I could not end up with that.
Yeah.
And by chance, I don't know how, I decided to become a doctor. So
Mm.
this is why I ended up as a medical doctor.
Mm-hmm.
During my time, my medicine studies,
Mm-hmm.
I had a good model, which was Claudie Aigneret. Donc she was the first French woman astronaut.
Yeah.
She spent she had two missions, with the Russian on one side and with the US side. And as soon as I saw, so I was doing astronomy like a pleasure for
Yeah.
me, and I saw her in a review,
Yeah.
and she was mentioned as a woman without vestibular, because she had no trouble at all in all rotating chair and so on. So at that point, and she was a medical doctor, a
Mhm.
rheumatologist.
Mhm.
At that point, I said, okay, so this is doable. I know my view is not so good, but we never know. So at that time, I decided, okay, follow your path and you will see what's happened.
Mm-hmm.
And after my medical studies, I decided to specialize in biology, in the medical biology, but that was a bit boring being in a lab. And I was lucky enough, and I came back to what I said before,
Yeah.
to see this application for the woman doing this experiment.
Right.
But they needed a physician, a medical doctor. So I
Right.
applied, and this is how I ended up there.
Amazing. It's like the universe plans it all for you. So, how was it for you, Mila?
Yeah, I think, it was really chance
Right.
that I got into NASA. I've been there now, more than about 26 years and,
Wow.
and have loved it. But really, initially, I was working on a manuscript publication from my postdoctoral research. And I happened to be taking my lunch break. And back in those days, newspapers is where you saw job ads. And
Yeah.
I was reading the newspaper and having my lunch, and there was a job offer or application from NASA
Yeah.
for a scientist who had worked with fruit flies and with yeast systems. And both are organisms I had used for my PhD and my postdoctoral research. So I applied, and then, one thing led to another, got interviewed, and got the job, and I've really enjoyed it. But if you had asked me, even
Yeah.
a few months before then, I didn't know anything about what NASA did or what biology they did. So it really was just serendipity, if you
And a lot
if
of
you will.
openness from your end that you didn't
Yes.
resist the idea of working at
Exactly.
NASA.
Exactly. And exactly like you said, yeah, being open to possibilities and
Yeah.
opportunities.
Yeah. Now I'm just going to ask you some of the rapid fire questions, so you have to answer really quickly and in the interest of some time. So, one question for you, Mila, is what's one simple and effective way to introduce children to space science?
Yeah, I think one really good way is to watch movies on, and there are some really good ones, like Martian is one I love. Reading books
Yeah.
related to that, that's another area. And I think that's interesting for the kids too. You have a lot of children's books on space.
Right.
So yeah, those would be some of the ones I would.
So, coming to books, what is that one book would you recommend for people to know more about space?
Maybe the last book written by Thomas Pesquet. He
Uh-huh.
has this not his last book, but the one from the previous mission, because it's really explaining before. So what is it? What is it? This is a big one, but
Okay.
with a lot of picture. You know?
Okay.
So this one is
Illustrative.
good. Yeah, illustrative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And what is that one Indian snack you would like to take to space?
Ah.
And if you want to do studies
Ooh.
there?
My first thought was samosa, but then I'm gluten intolerant now, so I cannot have that. But I would say maybe idli. I love idlis. So.
Okay. And Brigitte, is there any unexpected lesson from your life or your career that you have learned?
Maybe it's close to what you asked me. Space brought me everywhere, even in Japan.
Yeah.
Because I was working on a movie with somebody who win ESA project, and she was among the winner. And she said, "Okay, now we have to do the movies because the astronauts were not available. It was during the COVID time, so I worked with her, and I ended up to go there in Japan because we win the short festival movie.
Yeah,
festival.
oh, wow. Okay.
So this space brings me everywhere,
Great.
even in
Space
India.
brings you everywhere. Yeah, definitely. And Mila, what is that one discovery that you have in mind? You would say, "Oh, this was the discovery."
Maybe if I had to point to one, I would say the fact that there is a group that was able to grow plants using lunar regolith. They did have light and water and nutrients added to the regolith, which you would if you were growing plants on the surface of the moon. But the fact that they were able to take regolith from the Apollo years and actually grow Arabidopsis plants in there, I thought was a really interesting result.
All right. And do you both have any last one-liner for the people who are watching this, who are, doesn't matter whether they're young kids or adults, generally about space science and space?
Yeah, I think space is a new environment. We still need to know more. And I think it can give you really good ideas to train and to have new experience.
Yeah. And how does that matter to you? How would you tell that to a young adult who is inspirational and who wants to inspire to become a space biologist, space scientist?
I would say follow your dreams. It's a very exciting area to be in.
Yeah.
There's a lot more to be discovered and to be learned.
Yeah.
And so we want that next generation to help us with the next steps so we can be in space for long durations.
Definitely. And I think there's a lot of positivity and hope in that note. On that note, we conclude this session, though I would like to go on and on. Thank you so much, Mila. Thank you so much, Brigitte, for coming all the way, crossing so many continents and oceans and being here to discover more about space. Thank you so much.